Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in the sewing room and I am going to show you how to sew up some really simple and cute towels for the holidays. You can take a simple, plain kitchen towel and with a few fabrics and a straight stitch, you can make these really cute holiday and seasonal towels. They're great for decorating your own kitchen or as gifts. So if you want to see how to make these super cute towels, stick around. Well, I was hoping to get this video out a lot sooner, but this time of year it's really busy and I've just finished getting it edited, and I was on the fence about whether or not to put this video out, and I thought, well, of course I'll put it out because you don't have to use Christmas fabric for these towels. You can use any fabric you want. You can make it any holiday, or you can just make it coordinate with your kitchen. So I've gone ahead and put these out, but if you are still looking for last minute gifts, you still have time to make these. They are so fast and easy, and they're fun to make, and you can make several in an afternoon. So I hope you enjoy this video. The first towel that we are going to be making is what I call a honey bun strip towel, and it's because those strips are the size that you get in honey buns. They're 1.5-inch strips. So if you have some honey buns or some extra pieces of honey buns laying around, you can use those. If not, you can just cut 1.5-inch strips off of yardage that you already have. I have found that I can also use fat quarters and use several coordinating fabrics from a fat quarter pack because I haven't found a towel wider than a fat quarter. I'm going to use this white towel right here, and the first thing I need to do is find out which side is the right side. And so look for the seam or the hem and make sure the hem is on the wrong side and have your towel face up. Then we're going to measure our towel to see how long we need our strips to be. So it looks like this towel is going to be about 15.5 inches wide. So we are going to write down 15.5 inches. And we're going to add some fabric on the ends so that we can turn it under and make a finished edge. So let's add 1/2 inch on both sides. And when we add that up, we get 16.5 inches that we need to cut our fabric. So let's figure out what fabric we want to use. I have some pretty Christmas fabric here, and remember, you can do this in any seasonal fabric, any fabric that coordinates with your kitchen, a friend's kitchen, whatever you like. And so since I'm making these during the holidays, I am going to choose these 3 colors, and I think I'll put them in this order too, having the reds on the outside and the pink on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my jelly, or these are actually you'd either have honey bun strips, or I actually cut these 1.5 inches because I had these 3 fabrics in some yardage. So I'm going to lay those strips right on top of each other, and we're going to cut all 3 at once. So remember, we need to cut 16.5 inches, but before we do that, we do want to get rid of that selvage so that we don't have any of that in our towel. And so just cut so that all three pieces have their selvage taken off. And you have a nice square edge there. Okay, then let's measure 16.5 inches away from that edge. I'm a little tight on space right here next to my sewing machine. And so right there is 16.5 inches. We'll lay the line on the edge and then we will cut on the other straight edge. And there we have our three pieces. That is very, very simple. So let's determine how we want to lay these out. And like I said, I kind of liked that red, pink, red look. So I think that's the way we will sew this. And so we're going to sew the top one and the middle one together first, a 1/4 inch seam from the edge. And we have that sewn. And let's open it up and take a look. And I'll just finger press it like that just to hold it back. We'll press it after we have all three pieces together. Now we're going to add that bottom piece, and again a 1/4 inch seam from the bottom there. And we've got that done. Let's lay it out and see if it looks good. That looks good. Let's press it. And it does not matter how you press it. You can press it all in one direction. You can press it toward the center. You can press it outside. Whatever way you'd like. You can even open the seams if you'd like. Now we have it all pressed. Just need to trim up some of these threads. And there we have it. Everything looks nice and straight. And so remember, on the ends of our strips, we allowed a 1/2 inch extra. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fold under 1/2 inch on both ends. And I have a hot ruler that is just so nice. I got this in a sew sampler box, and it makes turning under accurate seam allowances so easy. And you just iron right on the ruler and the fabric, and it just is great. So do both ends that way. And we have it pressed under. Let's make sure it lines up accurately. It should go from edge to edge, and it does. That looks nice. You don't want to have it hanging over, or you don't want to have it too short, so just make sure it looks nice. Now we need to finish off that top and bottom edge, and we'll do that by pressing under a 1/4 inch of the fabric on both sides, and I'll just use my hot ruler again to do that. If you don't have one, just make it as close as you can to a 1/4 inch. And here it is pressed. Now let's work on these corners. These corners can be a little tricky, and we want them to look nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all fold that corner in, and then press the or actually bring in the sides and the top, and then I'll just put a pin in it. And I'm going to give you a close-up view right here too. So we're going to try this other corner here, and here's the close-up view. So what I'm going to do, and I found that using a pin works really nicely. It gives you a nice straight edge. I just line that up on the point of that crease, and then just turn under each of those sides, and I put a pin in it. And now it's a little tricky to put a pin in it when you've got a towel underneath, because you don't want to catch that towel underneath. So I should have just had my sewing mat underneath there. Okay, now we've got it. And I'll do the same thing with these other corners. Again, using that ironed fold as a reference. We're going to put the pin right there on the top corner there, and we are going to bring it across, press down the top, press down the side. Sometimes that fabric wants to do its own thing, and then put a pin in it. So we're going to do this for the other side as well. So there it is, all pressed under. A little wonky looking, but that's okay. We're going to get it to look nice. And we're going to figure out where to place it. And this towel has some lines on it, and so I'm going to follow that line with that bottom seam, and that'll help me align this correctly. So I'm just taking the pin out of the corner there and now replacing it into the towel and the corner. Then we'll do the same thing with that top corner, making sure that that edge is right next to the edge of the towel. Then we're going to turn under that seam. It's already pressed, but of course it wants to come undone, and we are going to pin everything down in place. And then we're going to get to the other corner, and we're going to do the same thing. Make sure that corner is meeting the edge of the towel. Same thing on the top corner there. And they're nice and straight. And then we will flip it so it's easy to pin, and go ahead and put pins all the way across. That way when you're sewing, it will stay in place. And I think we get this one in place, and I think it's going to be good. There we go. Now we are ready to sew it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all around the outside edge, and I'm going to do a really close stitch because I want to make sure I get that 1/4 inch seam allowance that's turned in. Then I'm also going to stitch in the ditch down the middle on those seams. And so here it is, all stitched up, and it looks super nice, and you can see on the back, looks great, and it is ready to use. Simple, simple, and fun quilt, and they're so nice to use. I just enjoy having these in my kitchen, and I enjoy giving them as gifts. This next towel we're going to make, we're going to call the quilt block towel, because you can use any quilt block you want. We're going to make a sawtooth star. And this is in Christmas theme, but you can use it any fabric you like. You're going to need some background fabric. I have white for 2.5 inch squares, 4 3-inch squares. Then my points are 4 3-inch squares, and my center is a fussy cut 4.5 inch square. And I've just cut that Santa right in the center so it will look really cute. So we're going to start with the 2 3-inch squares that are for the points. Then let's take a 3-inch square of the background fabric, a 3-inch square of the star fabric, and place them right sides together. And then let's get a straight edge, and we're going to draw a line from one corner to the other. And you can use any kind of marking tool you want. This will be in the seam allowance. And so I have a line right there. You can put a pin in this if you would like. I am at the point where I just like to sew. We are going to sew 1/4 inch away from each side of that line. And we're going to do it with all 4 of those pairs. I have found that doing chain piecing with these, and that means just doing all of them at the same time, works the best and is the fastest. I have seam tape on my machine, and that also helps, but I go down one side and then I go the other side and just don't cut the threads in between. But when I'm finished, I cut the threads, and here's what we have. And you can see I've used red thread, so you can see that very well. And I've got those seams 1/4 inch away from that line that we drew. Now we're just going to cut on that line that we drew. And we should have 8 half square triangles. So we just cut those. You can cut them with the scissors, or you can cut them with a rotary cutter, whatever you prefer. And we are going to square up these squares, so if you weren't exactly accurate, we will make them look good. And I'm just using my Quilt in a Day square up ruler, and I put the line of my ruler, if these are going to be 2.5 inch squares that you need to make them squared up into, and I put the 2.5 inch line on that seam, and then I trim both sides, and that works fine. You could also open all of these up and press them, and then take a 2.5 inch square template and trim them, or you could take a larger one and trim them to 2.5 inches that way as well. So I'll get all of these squared up and bring you back. And these are all trimmed, and now we are going to press them. I also clipped the dog ears off of them, and you can do that too. We are going to press them whichever direction you would like. You can press them toward the dark side, the light side. You can press them open, whichever you would prefer. And they are all pressed, and now we're ready to lay them out. And so we have our little picture at the top corner, so we can kind of see how these need to go. And I am just going to lay them out in that pattern. Just make sure your half square triangles are going in the right direction, otherwise your star points will be goofed up. And everyone's done it, so if you get one goofed up and you get it sewn in, just use your seam ripper and take it out and do it again. So there we go, that looks good. And then we'll put those 2.5 inch squares in all of the corners. So once we have this laid out, we're basically just going across in rows to sew them together. So I am just going to, first of all, start in the middle. I'm going to get those two sewn together first, and then these two on this other side sewn together. That way I can put them with that middle square. So let's do that. And here those are. I've pressed them also, and I just pressed them to one side. And let's put those right there. So now we have 3 rows that we need to sew all the blocks together in. So let's just start there, and let's do this one here too. And I'm just putting this in fast forward so you can kind of see the blocks that I do and the order I go. And really on the pressing, it's up to you, the directions you press. The only time that it's going to be too big of a deal is when you sew your rows together. And in just a minute, I'll show you how we do it on this block. But I'm just going to go ahead and finish putting these pieces together and sewing them together until we have all 3 sections ready to sew together. And we're on our last seam right there. And I've pressed it, and we've got it right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my seams toward the center block on that middle piece, and then on the top and bottom strip I'm going to press toward the outside corners. That way our seams will lock really nicely, and we'll have a nice flat block, and it'll line up really well too. So I'll just sew on both ends there, and our star will be finished. And here is our finished block. I have pressed it, and I pressed the seams open on those last 2 seams that I did just to help it lay flat. And now we could square this up a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we will get it just a little bit straighter. This block should measure 8.5 inches when it's done, but again, yours might be smaller, it might be a little bigger, just depending on your seam allowance that you used. Whatever it is, just keep it at that, but we're just going to trim just a little bit off the edges where it looks like it's hanging over more on some sides. Um, I will take a ruler that's the same size as my block if I have one. So if I had an 8.5 inch square, I would use that. I don't have, so I usually fall back on my 12.5 and I just line it up with the 8.5 inch lines and I trim anything that is outside of that block size. And as you can see, it's just a very little amount that is coming off. When we add our border to this block, we do not want to cut off our star points. So try to make sure that you don't take any more fabric than you need to off the edge. There should be a 1/4 inch space between the end of the star point to the edge of the fabric. So be very cautious of that. And if you're a new sewer and your points are cut off, don't fret about it. It does take some practice to be able to get your points. And so if they're cut off, it's okay. Now we're going to add a border to our block. Now this is completely optional, but with the points on this star block, it makes it so much easier to attach it to your towel and keep everything accurate. So I'm going to put a 1 1/8 inch by 8.5 inch strip on both sides here. Now if your block was bigger than 8.5 inches or smaller, make it that length. So we're going to sew those 2 strips on both sides. And it looks like mine is going to need a 1.5 inch by 10.5 inches. And yours may be different, so be sure you measure. And so those are going to go on the top and the bottom, and we'll sew those on. And here we have the border completely on and ready to go onto the towel. So let's pull out our towel and take a look at what we have. And I have 2 towels. I have a white towel and I have a red towel, so I was just checking to see which I preferred. This is what it would look like on a white. That's very pretty. And then this is what it would look like on a red towel. And that looks really pretty too. So I think I'm going to go with the red towel. Now there are several options to attach this to your towel, and I am going to be turning under the edges and stitching it on with a straight stitch. Now you could also just do a raw edge and do a blanket stitch or a satin stitch around it. That would be fine. But I like the finished edge on a towel, especially if it's a towel that I'm going to use, it will hold up a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it in about 1/2 inch all the way around. And since we added that border, we have lots of fabric to play with. But I'm adding 1/2 inch. That gives me a good amount of fabric to catch under my needle. And I'll bring you back when I get that ironed. So I've got the sides all ironed down, and now we're going to work with the corners to make them look nice. And just like we did on the corners on our last towel, we are going to use that same method. Of course, we have our little press lines right there, and we're going to lay our pin at the diagonal and then just fold those corners in and overlap them so we have a nice pointed corner there, nice and square. And we're going to do the same thing with the other ones also. And all corners are now folded nice and neatly. It's time to attach it to the towel. So let's lay our towel out right here and make sure we're doing it on the front of the towel, not the back of the towel. And I just use my ruler to measure to get it to center. And then I pin it down all the way around. and I just do a top stitch close to the edge, just like that. I also was able to do some stitching in the ditches for all around my star, and that way it's attached very nicely and it won't be coming off. And there it is, a towel with a quilt block on it. And I will share with you that I did make another towel using the same block and the white towel that we were looking at earlier. And this time I did not add the border. I just satin stitched around the edge. And then I also made a binding all the way around, and I thought that looked really cute, especially with the stripe. And so that one I thought was really cute too. So here are a couple of ideas for making towels. I hope you can use some of these ideas and are able to make your own. These are so much fun, and you can make several in one afternoon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content of my channel, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that, and it helps me out a lot. Also, don't forget to share and like. I hope you have a great week, and I hope to see you back here soon. Bye-bye.